On February the 28th, we are starting a sober march, we're calling it. So it's literally starting February the 28th. It's an alcohol-free challenge for
really
4
well,
weeks.
Dave. Sober march.
Yeah, it's like a sober march. You're marching into sober march.
Woo!
Do you get it? But it's a 4-week course. We're doing it with our friend Andy Ramage. He literally wrote the book, The 28-Day Alcohol-Free Challenge, which was a bestseller.
He's helped 100,000 people reestablish their relationship with alcohol.
And really, it's a good opportunity to kind of, like, I didn't realize how much, like, we gave up alcohol 20 years ago, not because we wanted it, just absolutely by chance. And it was one of the greatest catalysts for our own health. And because we've been off drink for so long, I forget how much of a barrier it can be to implementing some of these other good habits like sleep and eating more vegetables and things like that. Find out more on our website, thehappypear.ie, or we'll put a link for it somewhere here. So I guess we can take this in a million different directions. And the way that we know Andy from a number of years back, we met you on the Rich Roll retreat.
That's right.
You were kind of coming out with the 1 year, the alcohol-free mission was emerging.
Yeah.
It hadn't quite come to, it hadn't quite been birthed, I think, at that stage, but it was very much front and center in your mind, and it was unfolding. And since then, it really has grown legs and feet and arms. And
yeah, I remember actually on that retreat, we had the dinner on the last night, and do you remember people stood up and spoke about their reflections from the retreat? And I remember standing up saying, I've decided that I'm going to make this alcohol-free mission my life, and I'm going to quit my job, which was a broker at the time, and I'm going to start this movement somehow to help lots of people. And everyone got up and cheered, and it was like a really big moment. And that was it. I pretty much went back. I think two or 3 weeks later, I did resign.
It's amazing.
Which is hard when you got a family and kids to resign.
And it's amazing social accountability because you had that almost public declaration of intention. Suddenly you're like, I got to do this now. And you got to sit in your own and go, am I really ready to do this? Like, I'm leaving security to, pursue this dream of a social change and more a meaning, a job of more purpose possibly than a broker. Your chapter, which, before your alcohol-free mission was very much as a trader, as a competitive, high octane oil trader, was it?
Yeah, broker trader,
okay,
same sort of thing. But yeah, exactly that, in those trading pits where you'd scream and shout one another. You've seen it on the telly. I loved it. Again, for the same reason. I was sort of a bit bulletproof. Genuinely, I had the best 10 or 15 years of my life. I got to travel to all these beautiful places, earn lots of income, all that sort of wonderful stuff. And then it just got a bit to the point where it was like, oh, actually, I should be blissfully happy now. I was sort of mid-30s. I should have, by that yardstick of monetary success, been skipping into the office and singing Dippity Doodah, but I wasn't. I was like a real sort of 5 out of 10, like just plateaued a bit. And that was a real wake-up call for me. It was a bit of an epiphany of like, what are we doing?
Had you been aware for a number of years that, okay, alcohol or my current lifestyle is not, you said you're a 5 out of 10. Like, what were the seeds or what were the kind of indicators that you were, it was time to change?
Yeah, well, I think that sense that in my mind, I thought I just reached middle age. And I remember resigning myself to middle age thinking, oh, this is it. 35, you're meant to feel a bit shit. You're meant to feel tired. You're meant to feel 5 out of 10. You're meant to be 3 stone overweight. Oh, this is it. Welcome to middle age. Woohoo! Hey, what a result. This is crap. And I've got the rest of my life to look forward to. That was a big awakening for me. Plus, obviously reading Awaken the Giant Within, the self-development, the reflection around that. Then I looked at my own life and went, what am I doing? What brings me meaning and purpose, which is my family. So I doubled down on that. But what was funny, I resigned from that job to set up a new brokerage, a rival firm, but I was going to build it on this base of well-being, right? Which everyone said was impossible. You can't be a broker and not entertain and drink and do all those things. I was like, I don't care. But I got gardening leave for 9 months. So fully paid, fully looked after, to not work for 9 months in between those 2 jobs. So I traveled the world basically to meet all these brilliant thought leaders and big thinkers in the space of wellness. And I came back to the job and literally I was a changed man. I was going to meditate, eat salad and stuff. And I was doing all these lovely things. But the one thing that I hadn't changed was drinking. I hadn't even considered to question alcohol. It's mad, isn't it? We've got this cultural blind spot. I was looking at meditation and movement, and not once did I think, oh, what about the alcohol thing? But it wasn't until I got back into the office and found that my consistency in my nutrition, my exercise was constantly being undone by a couple of drinks or a night out or a lunch. And it was that awakening of, oh, I think it's the alcohol. If I can actually ditch that, then maybe that will unlock the consistency that kickstarts my nutrition, my movement. But I was scared stiff because you can imagine like I built a life around alcohol effectively. It's how I met my friends, my wife, my business was built around, I was the entertainer. And the entertainer meant in that industry, I was going to take you out and we were going to go for it. So the thoughts of taking that away scared the life out of me.
Did you sit and come up with a plan? Because there wasn't like, you know, when you first started this, there was no 1 year, no beer. I don't think there was many programs. You know, there's Alcoholic Anonymous, but like, you know, that it sounds like you were just a normal person. You weren't an alcoholic. So like, how do you go? Did you just sit down and kind of say to Tara, okay, I'm giving up alcohol for 28 days. It's my own experiment. I want to see how it goes. Or what was that process like?
No, I didn't really have one. And that's what I found really difficult at the start. There was no tribe. There was no one like me. In fact, Rich Roll, our good friend, was one of the only people that I really resonated with. But even Rich's story wasn't mine. He had a huge, you know, rock bottom story, rehab story. You know, that was the traditional story around alcohol. That wasn't mine. I stopped well in advance of that. Don't get me wrong, I was on a slippery slope, but I was more in that prevention. I mean, I call it middle lane drinking, which is people that drink sometimes averagely, sometimes moderately, sometimes heavily, sometimes not at all, which is basically everyone, right? That's basically 75% of the population. That's where I was. So there wasn't anything available apart from AA. That wasn't me at all. And in trying and finding it difficult to start, I started these challenges. I would literally say to people, I'm doing a 28-day break from the booze just to get them off my back for 5 minutes, and to also sort of say to them, I'm going to be back, don't worry. You'll get your drinking buddy back in 28 days.
Clever way to do it, because again, it's that sense of social accountability. Yeah. It's actually having a clear finish line. And it's like, as you said, don't worry, I'll be back. I'm not saying you're wrong. Yeah. You know, it's quite clever way to do it.
And that was the only, genuinely, I couldn't do it without that. Because
and how did you decide, like, sorry to cut you off, how did you decide that it was like all or nothing, that it wasn't like I'm going to cut down on booze, it's like I'm going to actually take a break from any consumption of booze?
Yeah, I think
alcohol.
In truth, there was probably about 3 years building up to that. And you sort of touched on that earlier, of waking up and never again, and just the sort of regret and the tiredness and the just couldn't be arsedness of it all, for want of a better word. So for me, it had to be a break. I just wanted to get some distance from it, just to test the system. Did it make me feel better? Did it give me more energy? Which it did, like unbelievably so. But I almost needed to get about 28 days or 2 weeks and beyond to start feeling those benefits, as it were. So for me, it was always going to be like a proper break. And I got to 28 days and it was literally, my life changed.
And so now, okay, so we're all on the same page here, and we've got similar backstories in terms of alcohol and whatever. And for anyone listening who's kind of probably got, they're kind of on board, they can see parts themselves in your story and kind of going, okay, yeah, maybe like I don't have an AA type relationship with alcohol, but sometimes I use it as I don't have the healthiest relationship with it. Like, what are some of the, like, over the years now, since starting 1 year no beer, what are some of the stats in terms of alcohol and what it does to you, and what's been your learning and your evolutions from it? Like, if you were talking to a friend and going, okay, these are some incredible stats about alcohol, which just aren't out there, that people don't know about. Can you tell us something about that?
Yeah, and I will. And I often wouldn't mention these to friends because I think that the stats out there are horrifying if you go down that route. And I think if you go too far down that route, people who are not motivated, I think they feel a bit like, hold on, you're telling me off. So I go right down the opposite route, which is all the positives and the benefits and the fun. But equally, on that side, I mean, one of the big ones that more people should know, and this really upsets me, this is the one that upsets me. For example, alcohol is directly linked to breast cancer in many, many studies. Yet most people are completely unaware of that. In fact, there was a bit of research recently in the British Medical Journal that said only one out of 5 women even knew there was an association with alcohol and breast cancer. So a bit unlike smoking, where, you know, right, everyone knows if you smoke, that's personal choice, isn't it? But everyone knows that causes harm and all various lifestyle diseases. People still don't even know that alcohol is associated directly with various types of cancer, but specifically breast cancer in women. That frustrates me a little bit. I think that upsets me. I think at least all women should know that, and all men as well should know the facts, and then at least they're coming from an empowered place. Whereas at the moment, we've got this cultural mythology around alcohol, haven't we? Most people wouldn't even call it a drug.
No. And it's almost like it's the same way back in the 1950s or 60s. Like a friend of ours who he's given up cigarettes. He's been smoking cigarettes for 50 years. And he said, well, back when I was 10, like he said, I started when I was 12. And he said, back then, all the footballers, they'd be smoking cigarettes on the touchline. He said the doctors smoked it, the political, like everyone smoked, and it was just, that was the cultural norm.
Yeah.
And nowadays, like alcohol it's a very accepted, you know, thing which we do in our society nowadays. But I wonder in the future, will there be a day where maybe it mightn't be the extent of smoking, but it's certainly, it's an accepted, you know, drug, you know, societally accepted.
Yeah, and I really think it's starting to shift now. I've seen it in the last 8 years. For example, when I first stopped drinking, there was one alternative that I could find available called Beck's Blue. It wasn't particularly well stocked. Now there are thousands upon thousands of alcohol-free alternatives, which is a huge shift. Guinness have just brought out their 0.0, and it's amazing. I don't know if you've ever tried it, but it is absolutely amazing. When those type of things happen, you know there's this cultural shift happening. And those huge companies are not making this stuff for the sake of it. They're making it because the demand is there.
If fun is associated with your Friday nights or Saturday nights and just going getting drunk and always associated around drinks, well, then you have to kind of almost have to get existential and look at your own life and go, okay, like maybe others mightn't see me as fun, but how do I enjoy myself where it's not about alcohol, where it's not about some external stimulant? Like what makes me tick? And it probably forces you down that road.
Oh yes, it's so true. And that's where you get that reflection to the authentic self, who you really are, and get comfortable in your own skin.
Like almost like, say, similarly to us, you grew up in an environment that was quite masculine or macho, you know, playing professional sport, then down brokers, very much alcohol, you know, keeping you in this kind of thing. And it was for us anyway, through giving up alcohol, it made me actually connecting with my own vulnerability and the more softer, the more female qualities, where it was more caring, nurturing, actually trying to connect, being more empathetic, more compassionate. And it was through this journey that I felt more whole. So I wonder if was it similar how you felt it?
Yeah, and this is a really important part, and I touched on this earlier. I think the alcohol thing, or stopping alcohol or taking a break from alcohol, that's the excuse to get people in the room. That almost brings people into this world, and then in that reflection around meaning and purpose, they find that softer side. They connect with a different level of themselves. That is where all the revelations come from, the transformations come from. It's not so much about the alcohol thing. That's just the excuse to get people to
look inward,
the room.
Question.
Yeah, and I think it kickstarts this whole self-development journey, which I predominantly do now, is help people around self-development, because that's the vital next step for me. The alcohol thing is the first bit, because most people at that stage they don't care about self-development. They're not in that headspace. You know what I mean? They're just maybe struggling a bit, or finding their relationship a bit frustrating, or they haven't gone there before. They come in to change their relationship with alcohol. In that reflection, it's like, oh, actually, what next? My mind and my beliefs have been changed a little bit. I've got a bit more time. I've got a bit more energy. What are my goals? What is my meaning? What is my purpose? And in that beautiful cauldron, I think that's why people go on these like life transformations that I get to witness all the time. It's just a beautiful thing.
And that's been because like you're still involved in the 1 year now beer mission. And the last couple of years has been more, you've kind of branched off into the personal development and helping other people, you know, transform their lives. And what are some of the things, like if you were to kind of meet someone, if someone came to you and said, hey, Andy, I'm feeling crap. Like I'm
a 5 out of 10.
I'm a 5 out of 10. I'm 40.
Overweight.
I'm whatever. Like, what are the steps that you do? Like, because you've written books in self-development. You've been coaching people in it. Like, what are the steps? What do you bring people? What's the journey look like?
Yeah, I mean, and I'll start with the really obvious one for me, is to take a break from alcohol. And I've just applied for my PhD.
I like the way you call it a break.
Yeah.
Don't give it up a break. That's a good distinction.
Because if it's a never thing, it's too much.
Yeah.
It's just take a break. But that's got to be, you know, I've literally just applied for my PhD in February.
Academia, go Andy.
I left school at 16. It's not bad, is it? I had to claw my way back into that.
Good on you.
So, and what I actually want to do with that is put the science behind all these lovely subjective benefits I keep talking about. You know, a 28-day break from alcohol, it's going to give you more energy, more time, improve your relationships, better sleep. To put all the science behind that for middle lane drinkers. So this is not about addiction, it's not about problematic, because I know.
I like the way you call it middle lane drinkers as well, because it's like, you know, like I think.
I thought you said middle-aged drinkers.
No,
when you were saying
it. You know, not an alcoholic, not a teetotaler, but somewhere in the middle where, like, is often a relationship with addiction, it's a spectrum. It's not like you're an addict or you're not. Sometimes the middle lane drinkers can be, you know, have similar kind of dependency on it, not necessarily to the same degree, but there is a dependence, a neediness, a social crutch, a social lubricant. When we're feeling down, we tend to turn to it.
Yeah, and I think it's that, if you think that's 75% of the population, that's where most people are in that middle lane. being affected by it, even in ways that are not really obvious. So they're not waking up and having done something horrific or rock bottom. Maybe they're just affecting their sleep, which is making them a bit more grumpy in their relationship, or they're slightly less motivated, or they're not consistent in their exercise. That group there is where I'm aiming everything I do. I think they need it the most. So the PhD will put a bit of science around that, because in my mind, it should be the first thing, or up there alongside mindfulness and exercise and nutrition, that if someone went to their GP, for example, and said, I'm feeling a bit down. All right, do you drink? Are you in the middle lane? Yeah, take a break from alcohol. My relationship's a bit strained and not going anywhere. Do you drink? Yes. You in the middle lane? Yes. Take a break from alcohol. Would you like more energy? Yes. Take a break from alcohol. Bring the fun to your life. Do all the things that you haven't been doing because you've got that new energy. Really connect with all the differences in your life, because that's unbelievable. So if you have that approach that there's nothing to give up and everything to gain, I think that's the number one thing that you bring, because then you get that lovely experiment and that visceral experience of, actually, when I was drinking, I felt like this. And when I'm not drinking, I feel like this. And there's a marked difference. That's a really powerful experience. And then you might be able to use that tactically to take tactical months off.
It's almost like what you're talking about is, one positive habit can change to others, and can, you can have a positive domino effect in your life. Whereas, if you tend to drink, as you're saying, binge drinking 3 and 4 drinks, will lead to probably less good sleep, which will probably lead to less good food choices, which will lead to probably less good relationships. And it can have a negative effect. Whereas if you can kind of take the seed out take a break for a period of time, well, then you might experience kind of what it's like. You probably have to reach these personal development questions and have to be faced with some of these truths on the journey to become your authentic self. But ultimately, every single one of us, everyone listening, wants a better relationship with themselves. We all want to like ourselves more. And sometimes we use other outlets or other tools such as alcohol or other things, stimulants, to try to get away from ourselves or hide from ourselves. And I think the more we can reach that authentic self, the happier we're more likely to be.
Yeah, and that's the most exciting part, to see that happening, see that momentum, like you've seen in the plant-based movement since, for the last 20 odd years that you've been involved, but it seems to have accelerated in the last 10. It's the same with the alcohol-free movement. So it's exciting times ahead.